The scene described by Daniel occurs after the joint armies of the Medes and Persians decimated the city of Babylon. The vision spans 3 chapters and is accepted by all conservative scholars as detailed prophecies focusing on influential empires around Israel. It serves as a roadmap for the Jews, describing events between the life of Daniel and span all the way until Judgment Day. The natural reading of the vision is that of a great war which takes place between 2 dominant kingdoms, the king of the north and the king of the south, with Jerusalem at the center of this age-old conflict. The message is clear: from Babylon to the last days of human rule, a savage conflict will affect the Jewish race.
In the 3rd year of Cyrus king of Persia, a word was revealed to Daniel, whose name was called Belteshazzar, and the word was true, a great war. And he understood the word, and had an understanding of the vision. In those days I, Daniel, was mourning for 3 whole weeks. I had no pleasing food, neither meat nor wine came into my mouth, neither did I anoint myself at all, until 3 whole weeks were fulfilled.
Since the evidence points to Darius the Mede as being appointed by Cyrus to rule over the Babylonian region, the 3rd year of Cyrus would place the dating of Daniel's final revelation in the spring of 534 BC. It appears that Daniel or his scribe refers to his Babylonian name Belteshazzar. It is likely he was emphasizing that he was the same Daniel named Belteshazzar by King Nebuchadnezzar, since he was an old man and not some other Daniel in Babylon. Based on the accounts, Daniel is estimated as being somewhere between 85 and 90 years of age when he received this final revelation. It's all about an ancient great war that is prophesied across the remaining 3 chapters. Chapter 10 deals with the setting, chapter 11 the detailed prophecies, and in chapter 12 it reaches a prophetic conclusion. While aspects have been fulfilled, the structure exposes many a false claim or interpretation. While no immediate indication is given as to the reason for Daniel's mourning and fasting, since the angel later confirms Daniel as setting his mind to gain understanding and humbling himself before God, he was clearly seeking an answer from God. It reminds us of Daniel's purposeful fast in the revelation of the 77s, yet unlike the account of that vision, here he does not directly disclose the reason for doing so. We can surmise it related to his fellow Jews who remained unfaithful and were not in favor of returning to Jerusalem after the 70 years of Babylonian captivity came to an end. He also did not anoint himself with oil, which was commonly used in the hot, arid, desert-like conditions to soften the skin, which was often also laced with perfume, and as such was a spoil and a treat.
In the 24th day of the 1st month, as I was by the side of the great river, which is the Tigris.
While liberal scholars claim a dating of Daniel years after the events, Daniel actually gives us the exact date of the word and subsequent visions. The date is the 24th day of Nisan, fine-tuning it to 24 April 534 BC, more than 2,500 years ago. The Feast of the Passover was followed by the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which was scheduled between the 15th and the 21st day of the month. So this shows us that Daniel continued his fasting through these religious holidays. As Daniel specifically mentions the great river as being the Tigris River, many liberal scholars suggest that the scribe was in error, especially since the scriptures describe the Euphrates River as the great river. Now the Tigris River was roughly 56 kilometers or 35 miles from the Euphrates River and would have been frequently visited by Daniel as a Babylonian official. In his time, it was still a great river that had much history.
I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, a man clothed in linen, around his waist a belt made of pure gold from Upas. His body was like beryl, and his face like the appearance of lightning, and his eyes like flaming torches, and his arms and his feet like burnished bronze, and the sound of his words like the sound of a multitude.
With this description of the heavenly being, scholars are divided as to who this is. Some suggest it is an archangel, others suggest another class of angels like the 4 living creatures of Revelation, and yet others believe it is Jesus in a pre-incarnate form, known as a Christophany. Of course, a Christophany is believed to be Christ in bodily form before he came to the earth, where the Bible refers to him on certain occasions as an angel of the Lord, who is also called Lord, differing him from angels. Now, when we consider those to believe it is an angel, famous scholars such as Montgomery and Leopold believe it is the Archangel Gabriel. This appears unlikely, as Daniel would have recognized the Archangel, as he had previously seen him in the vision of the ram and the goat, and the vision of the 77s. Now we consider the view that these are another class of angels, such as the 4 living creatures. The prophet Ezekiel, Daniel, and John the Apostle described a particular high class of angels as living creatures. This option clearly remains open, as they have very similar descriptions to this man in the vision. But things get a little trickier, as when we compare the details of this vision to that of John the Apostle in Revelation, where Jesus is identified, the traits are also remarkably similar. While Daniel described this man as being clothed in linen, John described Jesus as being dressed in a white robe. Daniel described a golden belt extended around his waist, likening it to Uphaz, which is fine gold, while John described the vision of Jesus as having a golden sash around his chest. Both Daniel and John described the heavenly being as having feet like burnished bronze, eyes like flaming torches or blazing fire, and the sound of his voice was likened to the sound of a multitude of raging waters. The facial descriptions are also similar, where Daniel described the man's face as the appearance of lightning, while John described Jesus' face as the sun shining in all its brilliance. The 7th feature, Daniel describes this man as being like a man, while John refers to Jesus as like the Son of Man. With the 7 traits so similar, one can readily see why there will be debates among scholars. The one thing that stands strongly in the favor of this being Jesus is that Daniel had encounters with angels before this vision. This one was markedly different in that he called this heavenly man Lord. As with the other visions in the Bible, an angel would not allow himself to be called Lord, because that is the Lord's business. Daniel had remained resolute with King Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar, and showed great strength in his assignment to the den of lions. Yet in receiving instruction from this heavenly being, he is weak and overcome with fear and very high levels of anxiety. This seems to imply it is something more than an angel and a possible Christophany. So let's read for ourselves what happens next. While Daniel was with other men at the Tigris River, they did not see the majestic heavenly being. However, they experienced fear, as they are described as having a great trembling coming over them, and they fled to hide. Such elevated levels of tension have never been associated with angels, yet again providing a valuable clue that this heavenly messenger is unique and formidable, likening him to Christ. Paul and his companions had a very similar encounter with his Damascus experience, where Paul saw the vision of Christ, while his companions could only hear his voice. Just as Abraham, Moses, and Elijah was left alone with God, so Daniel was left alone in the presence of this heavenly man. Twice in this passage, Daniel declared that no strength remained in him, and his body physically deteriorated in the presence of the visitation. In weakness, Daniel had fallen face down to the ground, hearing only the raging voice as he descended into a state of unconsciousness. Later, John the Apostle fell at the feet of Jesus in his vision while on the Isle of Patmos. All these factors once again indicate the presence of deity. The phrase "I fell into a deep sleep" also strengthens the scene as describing God's presence, since it suggests an induced sleep characterized by the presence of God. While it is not evident from this passage how much time passed by, Daniel was startled as a hand touched him, guiding him to his knees by holding the palms of his hands. Daniel gradually recuperated, and after being guided to his knees, would eventually stand up trembling. The phrase "man greatly loved" originates from the Hebrew word "aish chamad," which is better translated as a man who is highly esteemed. Daniel was previously affirmed in the same manner in his vision of the 77s, and would also receive this third confirmation before the angel begins his long discourse on the future. The Hebrew root word, often translated as understand, means to perceive, to discern, or mentally distinguish, and implies applying both skill and intelligence to what is said. Upon hearing his words, Daniel trembled in fear, indicating both his humility and his reverence for the word of God. Daniel needed assistance to understand, and he had to apply himself to have a fuller comprehension. Who does God reveal his wisdom to, and who does he look on in favor? God previously spoke through the prophet Isaiah, indicated he considers those who are poor and of a contrite spirit, and who both hear and who tremble at his word, as worthy. This confirms why Daniel is so highly esteemed by God, as even though he climbed into influential government positions, his spirit remained humbled and in awe of the words of God.
Then he said to me, "Do not be afraid, for from the first day that you did set your heart to understand and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard. And I have come because of your words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. But behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, because I was left there with the kings of Persia."
The words of the majestic being were soothing and appeared to calm Daniel. His humbling attitude before God brought fruit, as God already decided on the first day that he would honor the desire of Daniel's heart in providing him with a more detailed understanding of the matter. Such is the power of a righteous person, that God responds immediately, although there was an apparent delay. We get a glimpse of heavenly forces at battle in a realm we know very little about, regarding the unseen world. The angelic being was delayed, resulting in the archangel Michael coming to his assistance. The text provides insights into the functions of angels. Gabriel's appearance to Daniel and through the New Testament is always associated with the message provided, while the archangel Michael is regarded as an angel of war. Michael is ultimately responsible for casting Satan out of the heavens before the second coming of Christ. Just as humans have the ability to oppose and rebel against God, it appears that fallen angels are also permitted to exercise their free will within boundaries. Paul described the spiritual battle Christians face in his letter to the Ephesians, which describes that as believers, we are not wrestling with flesh and blood, but rather against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. While very little is known of the inner workings of the spiritual realm, it is apparent that Satan and his forces were also organized and attempted to prevent the dissemination of information about the future of the Jewish race and their restoration to God. They could delay the answer, but ultimately their resistance was subdued.
Now I've come to make you understand what shall happen to your people in the latter days, for the vision refers to future days.
The interpreting angel specifies that the vision has as at its heart thy people as the subject matter and context of this vision. This placed the Jews and Jerusalem slap bang in the middle of prophecy. While it spans many years, with significant historical fulfillment in the past, it will culminate only in the latter days. This is a term used frequently by the prophets, who spoke ultimately of both the restoration and the elevation of Jerusalem to a prominent world-heralded city. Daniel once again shows physical weakness. Let's read for ourselves his reaction. So Daniel lowered his position, turned his face towards the ground, and he was dumbly stricken. While some scholars suggest that he was doing this to show humility, since he described himself as being unable to speak, it rather suggests that he was overwhelmed by the events which had transpired. This time, something like a man's hand touched his lips, and Daniel could speak. Since Daniel refers to him as my Lord and utters the words, "For how can a servant of my Lord talk with my Lord?" it does support the view that this was a pre-incarnate form of Jesus, as an angel would forbid him to honor him in this manner. It appears that Daniel differentiates between the interpreting angel and the one who had the appearance of a man. With the first touch, Daniel was raised to his feet. The second allowed his voice to be heard, and with the final touch, his strength was restored. Daniel was once again confirmed as being highly esteemed and calmed and reassured that he should not be afraid. Immediately Daniel was strengthened and would not require further strengthening throughout both the vision and the words he was about to receive. Finally able to speak, he beckoned the angel to relay his message.
Then he said, "Do you know why I've come to you? Now I will return to fight with the prince of Persia. When I go forth, behold, the prince of Greece shall come. But I'll tell you that which is inscribed in the book of truth. And there is no one who contends with me against them, except Michael, your prince."
So the angel asked a rhetorical question as to the reason for his visitation, and then proceeded to explain that he still had a major battle on his hands. We can see that the warfare in heaven is in correlation to God's plan for mankind. The angel would return to fight against the prince of Persia, signifying a spiritual battle of the strong man assigned by Satan to Persian territory. This would allow the Prince of Greece to arrive on the scene, where the spiritual battle would continue. It's apparent that corresponding to literal events occurring on earth, there are limits which are set by God. These limits are enforced by his loyal angelic horde. It is therefore suggested that although God has revealed part of his plan to humanity, the fullness of his plan was already pre-recorded with all the finer details of execution. There is a variance of opinion among scholars as to the meaning of the phrase, the Book of Truth. In a sense, it is the Bible, but this is only one expression of God's Book of Truth. The Jewish Talmud speaks of books that were opened on their New Year's Day, where the fates of individuals and nations were recorded. Daniel has spent a great deal of time detailing the dating, the location, the preparation, and the events which led him to gain an understanding of what the vision meant. He also provided a backdrop for us to understand God's plan and how he operates. All the words Daniel is about to receive is inscribed in the Book of Truth, which, although many aspects are still a mystery, certain details Daniel is about to share. See you shortly in chapter 11, where the prophetic events are unraveled in spectacular detail. Until next time, Maranatha.